Whilst camping in Wells in Somerset late last summer, I received a story whilst walking through Ebbor Gorge. The story continued flowing after I had moved down to Devon in the autumn whilst exploring the rivers of the moors. One day I saw a salmon leaping in a river on my birthday and felt deeply inspired to write. Here I present the story which I recorded in part in the early spring of this year, along with some footage from the rivers and forests of Devon.
There was once a girl called Adhëa. She was exploring the forest with her family. They went up to a beautiful gorge and looked out at the view, looking at the sun. It was spectacular, but Adhëa was getting too close to the edge. Suddenly, she slipped and fell. Her family rushed to the edge. "Adhëa!" they called as they looked down. But she was nowhere to be seen. She had completely vanished. For weeks they searched the forest, and not a trace of her was to be found. They couldn't believe it. What had happened to her? Where was Adhëa? Her brother Nor-wood went to the forest every day. There was some part of him that knew she was still alive. He just wouldn't give up. For days he searched, for weeks, for months. Every day he went to the forest to look for his sister. His family gave up hope. But Nor-wood kept going. One day, at midnight, he saw a beautiful maiden moving through the forest by the water. She looked up and saw him, and startled, she quickly ran off. But as she jumped, a piece of jewellery fell from her wrist onto the stone. Nor-wood ran after her and picked it up. It was made of opals, and he held it. That night, when he went to bed, he had such a strong feeling to ask for a dream. "Show me who you belong to. Show me the lady who dropped you," he asked. He placed the jewellery under his pillow and he went to sleep. That night, at 3:30 in the morning, he was woken up by sounds. Woo! Woo! He opened his eyes, but he was in the dream time. He was in an overgrown forest, a grove. He looked up, and there she was, sat on a stone by a river, the beautiful maiden he had seen. She was wearing a long robe. It was translucent, an ethereal nature, so that it didn't get caught in the foliage, and a white dress. She looked up at him, and there was a sense of familiarity. "Adhëa?" "Nor-wood," she said, and they rushed to each other and hugged. Nor-wood was amazed. In his heart, he always knew that she was alive. "What happened to you?" Adhëa began to tell him the story. When she had fallen off the cliff, a golden eagle had swept by, and she had fallen on its back, and it had flown her to its nest. There she had lived with its chicks. It fed her every night and kept her warm. One day, Adhëa felt to follow the eagle as it made its way down towards a cave. It went up to the cave wall, and there it pressed its beak against the hole, and it squawked into the hole. Then it went towards another hole, and it pressed its eye against the hole, and another eye peered back. Then suddenly a great doorway opened, and a man appeared. He was wearing dark robes, and the eagle passed through. Adhëa looked at the man. He looked back at her. Welcome, Adhëa. We have been waiting for you for a very long time, he said. Adhëa went towards him. He invited her inside and she went in, and the cave wall closed behind her, and that was it. She was locked inside and lived there for many years. She learnt their language and their ways. They were incredible inventors, and they had made all of these inventions to create light in the cave. They were dark wizards, cave beings, who had fallen to fear. They had seen much destruction at the hands of humans, and they feared for their forest. Adhëa was helpful for them. They learned about her ways and she learnt theirs. She grew lonely there. She was allowed to explore the forest every night, but she could not go beyond the borders. "But you are a prisoner there," said Nor-wood as he listened to his sister's story. "How can we get you out?" "I have heard that there are enlightened elves in Dorath Forest," said Adhëa. "In 1 month's time, by the moonlight, I will leave my jewellery again at the stone, and we will meet in the dream time. Perhaps the elves can help."
By the river, Nor-wood spent his time meditating on what to do about his sister, and one day, as he looked up, he saw an elven lady emerge from the waters. Her name was Naia. They spent time moving through the forest. She showed him the mother tree, which had grown its roots around a huge stone, and he felt its grounding presence. She took him to mossy stones laid out in a circle around the moor trees. These were the councils of trees, sacred places to congregate. It was here, as they moved through this enchanting forest, that he realised that he was in his element. This was his home: oak trees, moss, and sacred waters and pools. Here he told Naia about his sister, and they called upon the forces of the land for counsel. They called upon Pan. Later that afternoon, Naia and Nor-wood moved through the mossy forest, over logs and stones and through a field of cows. They made their way upriver. He wished to walk to a barrow and to a stone circle he had seen on the maps, and took a nearby path up a cluster of ancient rocks looking over the bracken. Naia wished to meditate by the river. Some time later, Nor-wood made his way upriver where Naia had been meditating. She was now sat on a huge rock, and as he joined her, he realised that she was muttering words under her breath with her eyes closed, and seemed to have gone into a trance. "You fight for leaders amongst yourselves, but you do not recognise the true order." Her voice grew louder. "You fight for leaders amongst yourselves, but you do not recognise the true order." The water of the river gushed loudly, yet Naia's voice was rising. "You fight for leaders amongst yourselves, but you do not recognise the true order." She repeated these words over and over again, until finally her eyes opened up, and she noticed Nor-wood. The air was still. There was no breeze, no wind. Nor-wood nodded his head, realising that something powerful had come through. There was no need to say any more, and for some time they sat in silence. Finally, with hand in hand, they walked to the river edge, and there they enjoyed spending time piling up stones and making a little riverside altar. "Nor-wood, it is time for you to come and stay with us in Dorath Forest and learn more about our ways," said Naia. "A door is open for you, should you wish to enter." Nor-wood accepted Naia's invitation and followed her trail as they headed further into the deep, unknown places of the wood, the mysterious penetralia of the forest that seem to open up when we least expect them to. Things began to make sense as he moved through Dorath Forest and felt the fresh breeze on his face. Soon they came towards beautiful waterfalls and great stone statues. There, up in the mountainous forest, was a great elven city of light, and they climbed up the staircase. Up at the very top, on a great stone platform overlooking the forest, was a goddess temple. He felt peaceful in this place. There was a sense of joy in every corner and crevice, and the plants and animals seemed at peace with their surroundings. The colours were brighter, the light was stronger. He felt relaxed as he moved up the stairway, and they made their way into the large stone temple, which looked over the flowing waters. The temple roof had all kinds of colours: red felt, flowers, yellows, blues, patterns of foliage. It looked like a giant flower garden. Each part was maintained by a different goddess lady. This temple building was also a history centre called What is the Otherworld? 4 different portals led to different answers. One portal led to the Otherworld as it appeared in a future dream. One door led to an environmental vision of places overgrown where no humans were. Birds were singing there. I love you, 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 I love you. Another temple was out in the forest in a wild tent. The elves put incenses in the tent which captured the mood of the place and helped them connect with the goddess and with Pan. Some of the essences were very wild. Each incense or prayer invoked different energy of the goddess. Some were more masculine, some were more feminine. It was also possible to connect to the ladies of the otherworld. Nor-wood spent his summer in this beautiful place of Dorath Forest, and there they reflected further about what to do about the dark cave elves and his sister Adhëa.
Welcome to the temple of Dorath Forest. Come, take a seat, rest, dream.
One afternoon Nor-wood saw Naia sitting on the mossy rocks, performing a healing song which blessed the waters and offered peace and joy to all who went there. Nor-wood sat down nearby, and finally Naia joined him when she had finished. As they made their way upriver, Nor-wood's thoughts turned to his sister. Every full moon he had connected with her in the dream time, but they still didn't have a plan for her rescue. Sensing his thoughts, Naia began humming. It was a lamentation of the sadness of the world. Soon they came to large rapids and stood by some mossy trees with gnarled roots and felt the strong energy of the place. This vitality gushed upwards, filling the space. And suddenly, as quick as a flash of lightning, Nor-wood saw a salmon leap up a great rapid. "Did you see that?" he said as he stared at the waters. There they stood for a while, waiting to see if they would see it again. "They head upstream in the autumn, making their way to the breeding grounds, to their homes," said Naia. "A powerful reminder that sometimes you have to go against strong forces in order to return to your true home." "And what about Adhëa? Do you see it as a good sign for her?" asked Nor-wood. "The council of my tribe have already reflected on this, Nor-wood. When your sister is unhappy, so too is the land. I need to speak to you about something. There is a possibility that we can bring her back. There is a deep magic, an old spell that can be used only by our people. If you wish to help, you must bring me a magical salmon from these waters. But we warn you that there may be unforeseen consequences. The choice is with you." "Of course, anything. I wish for her freedom. I will bring you a salmon." "What kind of salmon did you say?" "A magical salmon. You will know it when you see it." "Naia, it is full moon this evening, and I will meet my sister in the dream time. Is there a message I can give her?" Naia nodded her head and gave Nor-wood a message. They returned to Naia's home in the mossy groves of Dorath Forest, and after borrowing a bucket, Nor-wood stood in the cool waters of the river. His mind was transfixed on finding the salmon, and he ignored the biting cold of the waters. Suddenly, a salmon leapt up in the air. It glowed with a brilliant white light, and Nor-wood was able to capture it. Carefully he carried the bucket back to the grove as quickly as possible. As the stars lit up the forest, Naia's people held a ceremony beneath the full moon, and they spent the night chanting and blessing the salmon. The fauns were there, and the dryads and water nymphs, and the forest fairies and hobs and pixies, the gnomes, the dwarves, the unicorns, the elves, and all kinds of magical beings. It was a delight to behold, and Nor-wood stood on a balcony up in one of the tree houses, watching the ceremony take place, as the elves and fairies moved with lanterns towards their sacred stones and places in the forest, singing and chanting along the way. That night, Nor-wood placed his sister's jewellery beneath his pillow and asked for a dream. In the middle of the night he was awoken by knocking sounds, and as he opened his eyes he realised that he was back in the forest grove again. His sister Adhëa was sat on a rock by a gushing river, and seeing him by the glade she ran upwards and hugged him. "Nor-wood, it's so wonderful to see you again," she said. "I have spent the summer in Dorath Forest and have good news," said Nor-wood. "A council and ceremony were held, and the elves have agreed to help you. At midnight tonight, wait by the riverside. Aid is coming." Nor-wood was approached by Naia, who held the bucket. "Come, we will release the salmon into the waters." "My name is Peter," said the magical glowing salmon. "Fare thee well," it said, and as soon as it touched the river it began to grow in size, and the river grew around it. Peter swam upstream and the waters turned purple and pink. For many hours he pushed against the current and leapt up the rapids, and soon he made it to the river outside the gorge of the cave Elves. It was midnight, and there, sitting by the river bank, was Adhëa. The salmon opened up his giant mouth and swallowed her up in one gulp. Adhëa was not frightened as she fell into the belly of the fish. It was quite comfortable inside. There was a chair to sit on, and she relaxed deeply and enjoyed the soft rhythms of the fish making its way downstream. The stars were shining in full glory as the salmon made its way down the rapids, and the beautiful purple and pink waters rolled on by, glistening in the starlight. Finally, the salmon made it down to a large pool. It was deep and turquoise in colour and full of nuts which had been dropped by the surrounding trees. Standing at the edge of this enchanting pool was a stag who was drinking from the water. The salmon opened its great mouth, and Adhëa jumped out. Yet as soon as she touched these magical waters, she turned into a deer. She looked at her reflection in the water, and then looked back at the stag, and before she could feel any sadness about her changed form, she felt a strong love for him, and the stag gazed back at her. Together they disappeared into the forest. That morning, Nor-wood and Naia felt the calling to walk upriver towards the magical breeding pools of the salmon, and there, in the enchanting turquoise pool, they found the large salmon, Peter. Naia uttered some words, yet instead of returning to his normal size, he turned into an elf who sat at the side of the pool. For a long time he looked around at his surroundings, slowly moving his limbs and rubbing his eyes before finally speaking. "My name is Peter, and I am the spirit and guardian of this pool," spoke the elf. Long blonde hair rolled down his body, and he wore long blue garments. His eyes twinkled, and he rested his head graciously on the palm of his hand. "This is my true form, and I guard this sacred place. These waters, blessed by the salmon, are a source of starlight healing amongst my clan. We drink just a drop of these waters, for its healing is powerful, and we honour the star makers here with great ceremony and reverence." "But how did you become a salmon?" asked Peter. "Long ago it was told in prophecy that I would one day be of great service to our world if I transformed into a fish and forgot myself. I was asked by a priestess in our clan if I was willing to make this sacrifice, for it was possible that I would forget myself completely and never return. Once I became a salmon, I forgot myself and could only remember my name, Peter." "Do you remember what happened to you, Peter? Tell me, did you see my sister Adhëa?" asked Nor-wood, who was amazed by the beauty of the elf, yet impatient for news. I did. She was in my belly, and I brought her downstream to this pool. There I opened my mouth, and as she fell into the waters she turned into a deer. She disappeared into the forest, having fallen in love with a stag." "Did you know this would happen? Did you know she would turn into a deer?" asked Nor-wood, as he turned in shock to face Naia. No man has ever stepped into that pool, Nor-wood. It is a consequence unforeseen, said Naia. But take heart, your sister is happy, and the land can be at peace. Nor-wood covered his mouth in shock, too speechless for words, and Naia thanked the elf with gifts for his shrines. They made their way deeper into the forest, and Nor-wood collapsed down on a rock by the river and began to cry, and Naia did not stop him, nor offer any words of advice, but simply said, "Let the tears fall." Nor-wood stood up and began moving through the forest, and as he walked and cried, his tears created giant pools of water, and a beautiful stream appeared, giving fresh water to a nearby village, which the people called Nor-wood's Tear. It was said that when certain constellations appeared in the sky, the deer of the forest would come to that magical healing place and drink from there.